Story 1. I am a woman, so I believe the first impression handshake for me is more about eye contact and a genuine smile. I find it displays confidence while also showing that I am warm and inviting. Story 2. I definitely prefer it over the dead fish handshake. It feels more professional and polite to me, as it shows you have good etiquette. Story 3. I find it important but not overly so. All I can say is that when I go to shake someone's hand and it feels very limp and weak, it's quite off-putting. However, I cannot fully explain why. Story 4. If you shake my hand to show how strong you are being rude. A good, firm handshake is manly enough. Story 5. I may be a bit unconventional, but I judge a limp handshake far less harshly than a bone-crushing one. Especially today, as handshakes are less common, some people are unsure, and that uncertainty is evident in their shake. However, when someone tries to crush your hand, it feels intentional. I instantly lose a bit of respect for that person. Story 6. The number of people I hear using the restroom next to me and then walking straight out without washing their hands, I'd rather not shake hands. Story 7. I prefer not to shake hands. I have witnessed too many people leaving the restroom without washing their hands. Story 8. I would prefer not to provide one at all. To be honest, I cannot stand people who feel the need to hold on tightly for no reason. Story 9. I personally just match whatever I receive from the other person. I never initiate handshakes but recognize their importance to those who do. Story 10. If you are going to shake hands, then have at least a decent handshake. I once had a handshake with someone who left their hand limp, and I still think about that years later. I do not believe that a poor handshake defines someone's character, but every time I see him, I remember that he has a really bad handshake. He is the bad handshake guy in my mind. Story 11. I feel like COVID made handshakes a complete faux pas in my profession. As I am a doctor, even between colleagues, it still triggers something deep down in me when patients initiate a handshake. Story 12. I prefer not to shake hands. I dropped the habit largely because our head of surgery never shook hands with anyone, and I realized why. Story 13. Still important. You never get a second chance at a first impression, and much is communicated in a handshake. Story 14. I believe a firm handshake is still appropriate, but overly aggressive grips can be obnoxious and seem like a form of one-upmanship. Story 15. The phrase crushing someone's hand is neither normal nor a sign of anything but insecurity. However, when done properly, it can indicate enthusiasm, mutual respect, a willingness to conduct business, or positive feedback upon meeting someone, such as saying, "Great to meet you." Story 16. More than firmness, I believe an accurate handshake is more important. I have experienced too many situations where one person only gets the fingers or something similar. Fist bumps are much more reliable. Story 17. Socioculturally, I believe most people still find it important, so I participate out of obligation to ensure they don't think I am disrespectful. However, personally, I dislike it and would prefer not to touch anyone's unclean hands, so I take any opportunity to avoid it. Story 18. I dislike it because some individuals overdo it and crush your hand. Some men put excessive energy into their handshake, believing that its strength directly correlates with their masculinity. Story 19. I would be fine with just a fist bump most of the time. I have no problem with handshakes. I simply go with the flow. If someone squeezes my hand as if they are trying to break it, I might interpret that as a sign of insecurity. Story 20. I try to avoid handshaking and hugging whenever possible. The pandemic taught me the former, while my natural reservedness taught me the latter. Story 21. My 87-year-old retired lawyer dad always assessed people by their handshake. When meeting a new guy I was dating, my dad would tell me what his handshake revealed about him. He considered it a choice when a guy tried to outshake him, as if attempting to establish dominance over my dad. Story 22. In Middle Eastern cultures, shaking hands is discouraged. They prefer not to touch the hand used for personal hygiene, which is understandable. Story 23. Someone close to me is dating a girl who is a bodybuilder, and she has a very strong handshake. I can assure you it has annoyed or put off nearly everyone who has met her. So, I don't know. Maybe it's important to know your audience. However, if someone judges me personally based on a handshake, I don't think I care too much about their opinions. I don't believe your value should be determined by that, unless you're applying for an arm wrestling sponsorship. Story 24. Not outdated. It is not relevant for 80% of people, but the remaining 20% will judge it harshly. From a professional perspective, it is genuinely important. Story 25. I would prefer not to shake hands at all. Many men have tried to crush my hand as a show of dominance. What is wrong with a respectful nod or a slight bow? I do not want to touch. Thank you. I do not like the feeling of my bones grinding together. Story 26. Just have to say, the feeling when you shake someone's hand and they match you perfectly in timing and firmness is really nice. It's an instant connection. Story 27. Not outdated. It is the way most Western countries greet. It is similar to bowing in some Asian cultures. In certain countries, shaking hands is a common greeting, especially in formal settings. In some European and American countries, people often shake hands and kiss when greeting. However, young people do not typically engage in this behavior with one another. When a young person does participate in this custom, they often appear more mature and composed than their peers. Story 28. I do not like to shake hands. I will raise my hand to indicate no thanks if the person is older, or I will offer my fist if the person is younger than me. I do not want to touch you, and I do not want you touching me. Story 29. Not enough people wash their hands thoroughly for this to remain one of my customs, especially after using the bathroom. Story 30. I have never met someone with a firm handshake that feels genuine. They often catch me off guard by reaching for my hand and gripping it too tightly, as if they are trying too hard to prove themselves as someone worth listening to. Handshakes are an old custom, but one we could do without. Story 31. I don't trust people's hygiene or their hand washing. I also dislike strangers touching me. I refuse whenever possible. Story 32. If I am about to shake hands with a confident person who I suspect will squeeze really hard and make it a contest, I always try to close my hand early, so I grab their fingers and not their whole palm. They will be unable to squeeze at all, and they will be acutely aware that they just delivered the weakest handshake ever. Story 33. I don't think you have to shake hands, but if you do, ideally it should be dry and firm. Nothing is more uncomfortable than shaking a limp, clammy hand. Story 34. If someone gives me a weak handshake, I definitely judge them. The same applies if someone gives me an excessively strong handshake. Story 35. Your handshake is a significant part of shaping your first impression. Even if I don't actively want to, I know in my heart that I will subconsciously think less of someone with a weak handshake than someone who squeezes back. It's not a long-term issue, nor will it prevent me from liking you in any capacity, but if I'm introducing myself to people at a party, I will definitely remember the person with the weak handshake. At the same time, I will also remember the person who tried to crush my hand in a much worse light. People should learn to have a firm but gentle handshake, including women. Story 36. I just had a conversation with some friends about this. It has some really interesting and intricate subconscious social implications. Limp implies, I'm not interested in putting effort into this social interaction, while crushing obviously implies, I want to dominate you. A firm, but not strength-testing handshake means, I value you enough to show you the best I can put forward, and will do so as your equal. I'm not saying that's always the case, but that's how many tend to read things subconsciously. It holds enough for me to determine that while it need not matter, to enough people it does convey that I respect them and expect the same in return. Story 37. The only kind of handshake that turns me off is when someone tries too hard to squeeze my hand. If they do that, I immediately know they are compensating for low confidence. Story 38. I don't believe it's important, but I also don't think it's outdated. I don't think doing a firm handshake is outdated. If we as a society decide that a handshake itself is outdated, I'm not going to argue. A handshake is the standard greeting, and barring medical issues, it's not difficult to do it well. It doesn't take any particular skill or rehearsal. A certain subset of the population interprets it as a sign of character, but you can easily deliver a firm handshake even if you're devoid of character. So I personally don't attach any value to it, and there is no downside to just doing it. Story 39. I learned that with my first real job. A firm handshake with a smile and eye contact. None of that limp handshake and no need to break bones. Just a confident and sincere, "Good to meet you." Story 40. As a woman, this was something my dad taught me as a child and encouraged me to do whenever I met someone new in a business setting. I still practice it to this day. Personally, I believe it demonstrates confidence and mutual respect for the other person. Story 41. Too many people do not wash their hands. I would prefer not to shake hands at all. We can introduce ourselves just fine from 5 feet away. Story 42. Limp handshakes are very off-putting and make me question if someone is okay. A very strong and overly firm handshake makes it clear that I know that person is not okay. Story 43. Absolutely. It's an unconscious thing. If someone gives me a weak handshake, I immediately get a bad feeling from them. Invariably, these weak handshakers come across as disinterested, detached, or condescending. It's best to have a firm, confident handshake to be safe. Accompany it with eye contact. I am an older woman, by the way. Story 44. As a woman, I enjoy the look of surprise on a man's face when we shake hands and my grip is firm and confident. It is rarely expected. Story 45. A firm handshake conveys interest and respect, while a weak, squishy handshake suggests disinterest. An overly strong handshake can come across as aggressive. A firm handshake serves as an opening gesture that establishes boundaries and tests interest. Story 46. The custom has been internalized by insecure management as a dominance ritual, displaying alpha credentials or judging a person's entire personality based on a single handshake. I have observed the incompetence of management in their hiring choices. They are unable to assess a person's character effectively. Story 47. Firmly grasp, hold tight, and pull toward you until you are nose to nose. Then say with a serious glare, "I am coming for your title." Story 48. Public service announcement. For people, especially women over 50, receiving a firm handshake can be very painful due to arthritis. Please adjust the handshake to suit the recipient's comfort. Story 49. I don't shake too firmly. I find that the eye contact and double grunt as our hands clasp encapsulates everything that needs to be conveyed. If it's a financial meeting, then I'll wet my palm first, obviously. Story 50. I am a woman. I don't do the limp fish or the firm handshake. If I am shaking hands with a man, I use the traditional 1950s style handshake. I don't grasp with my palm, just with my fingers. I encourage them to shake my hand as the lady I am, but that's just me. Story 51. Half the time I am taken by surprise and give a weak handshake. I am a 6'2" tradesman, electrician. I can bend quarters with my fingers, so I usually try to be gentle. Story 52. It is not the word I would use, but a few older individuals still believe that nonsense. If you want to impress those individuals specifically, then go ahead and do it. Story 53. As someone with autism, I don't understand this custom. I don't even want to touch people's hands. Please stop this, I beg. Story 54. I still believe a firm handshake is important. It is a simple but powerful way to show confidence and respect when meeting someone. While times are changing, some basic gestures of professionalism never really go out of style. Story 55. People place too much importance on what they expect from my handshake, which I find off-putting when I meet them. The effort I put into my firm handshake is simply to avoid criticism for not having one, nothing more and nothing less. Every time, stop analyzing it so much. Story 56. Yes, it is a sign of respect and a good way to greet people, especially if it is not someone you would greet in other, more casual ways. Additionally, I was taught how to do a good handshake as a child, and I feel that it leaves a positive impression, especially on older individuals. Story 57. It is socially important but also outdated. One of the few positive aspects of the COVID-19 shutdowns was not needing to touch anyone's hands for a while. People can be unhygienic. Story 58. Oh yes, absolutely. I was raised from an early age to give a firm handshake. Communicates strength and respect. Story 59. Handshakes should be strong and confident. Don't break hands. Don't give me weak, limp shakes. Shake my hand. Story 60. Yes, I do. A firm handshake with fingers facing downward and maintaining eye contact creates a great first impression, in my opinion. This approach allows you to engage with others while also inviting them into your personal space. The entire 2 to 3 second interaction builds an important foundation for any future interaction. Story 61. If you are going to shake hands, do so firmly. Find someone to practice with if necessary. A limp handshake suggests that this person is frail and lacks confidence. Story 62. I still appreciate a good handshake. I'm approaching 50 and from the South, where I grew up using terms like sir and ma'am, along with handshakes. I use these gestures as indicators to better understand a person. They are not guarantees, but if I meet someone and they try to crush my hand when shaking it, there's a chance our values may not align closely. Story 63. I had a serious hand injury that will never heal. It physically hurts my hand when people feel the need to squeeze hands. Additionally, touching hands is not appropriate. I continue to follow COVID guidelines. Story 64. I can't do handshakes anymore. The germs are concerning. I don't know where your hands have been, and I don't want my hands to come into contact. Story 65. It is important to know how to shake a person's hand, regardless of gender. Anything less than a medium firm handshake can be considered insulting to the receiver. To show real sincerity, use a two-handed shake by cupping the shaking right hand with your left. This perspective is based on an American point of view, and it may vary depending on cultural norms in different parts of the world. Story 66. I see that some people have been getting bad handshakes. Here's how my grandfather explained it to me. A handshake is a demonstration of confidence and self-control, especially in a business setting. If you're nervous or lack confidence, that will carry over into your muscle control. Your handshake may end up being too weak, too strong, too short, or too long. Something will reveal your internal state. Similarly, a lack of self-awareness or overconfidence can lead to an overly strong grip, which the other person will notice. A handshake shouldn't have a fixed strength or duration. It's about gauging and matching the other person, showing awareness of who you're greeting, and reflecting your internal emotional state. Some individuals expect a firm grip, so that is what they receive from me. Most people do not have the same expectation. There is about 200 milliseconds to assess this at the start of the handshake. The fact that some people always go for a maximum strength grip, regardless of the recipient, speaks volumes about them, which is the essence of the custom. It communicates something that is challenging to execute well but difficult to fake. Story 67. I think it's silly. What does your ability to try and break someone's hand have to do with most jobs? Story 68. I always ensure that I match the same pressure during a handshake. Some individuals attempt to assert dominance with their handshakes. Story 69. I find that as a woman, most men do not offer to shake my hand like they do with my partner, so I offer the handshake first. Their response tells me a lot about how our future interactions will go. It is honestly a way to assert myself, showing that they need to take me seriously and talk to me, not just my partner. Story 70. Context? I fist bump someone I'm supposed to like casually, but I would give a handshake if it was professional in nature. I would probably just ignore a stranger on the street. Story 71. My neighbor will crush your hand. The large individual at work is probably trying not to, but it feels like a toddler holding hands with an adult. Then there was Uncle Gilbert. He would grab your hand lightly and sway it sideways back and forth. It was hilarious. Such a gentle and wonderful guy. I work in construction. For what it's worth, you want to make a first impression that shows you are physically capable of doing the job. If I'm meeting someone for a marketplace deal, that firm shake is a small thank you for having an item I need at a good price. Story 72. A firm handshake is professional, portrays good etiquette, and reinforces what has been said prior to the handshake, such as, "Nice to meet you, thank you," and "my pleasure." It is also important to look someone in the eyes when shaking their hand, as this is a display of trust. Story 73. Handshake is definitely still important, and hand sanitizer is absolutely essential. I'm not touching my face or any part of me until I can get away to myself and apply it immediately. Story 74. You do not always have to give a handshake, but if you do, make it a good one. It should be firm, but not too strong, and always accompanied by eye contact. Story 75. I don't know where your hand has been. Maybe your dog was just licking it after having a big mouthful of its own waste. Story 76. I am in the business world. My rule is to match the other person's grip. If they are firm, I am firm. If they are soft, I am soft. If you want to relate to people, connect with them, and gain their favor, it is best to mimic their body language at least a little. Story 77. The owner of the bowling center I used to visit taught me how to give a good handshake. Don't crush their hand or you come off as rude. If it's too loose, like a dead fish, you come off as weak or untrustworthy. It's an important part of making a good first impression and reflects who you are as a person. Story 78. I find it hilarious when I go in for a strong handshake, meaning my hand is dominant and comes in palm down with men over 50. It's as if I've cracked some power code, and they look at me as if to say, "Wait, but you're a woman and younger than me? What?" Story 79. Yes, handshakes are still good professional greetings. I have a question for the men. Do other men give weak handshakes to you? They do it to women sometimes, which is quite unsettling. I'm curious if they do it to men as well. Story 80. I think a firm one is good, but I often find older people who prefer a softer approach. I never feel judgmental about it, and I'm not sure it matters much for most people. However, I believe you can't go wrong with a firm one, as long as it's not too firm. Story 81. It depends on what you mean by firm. Any pressure other than light pressure is rude and inappropriate. You are not impressing anyone with your grip strength. Story 82. I prefer a firm handshake during the first meeting. After that, it moves to pats on the back and eventually hugs. I saw a friend for the first time in a while yesterday during a random encounter. I got up, gave them a big hug, and introduced myself to their fiancé with a handshake. I believe a firm handshake is still important, especially when meeting fathers. Story 83. Yes, the handshake is still important. I don't trust a weak handshake, and an overly enthusiastic handshake makes me wonder what the person is hiding. Story 84. The number of people I have seen leaving a bathroom without washing has made me much less likely to shake hands. Fist bumps are a better alternative. Story 85. The long-held idea was to check for weapons, not to squeeze so hard that you cut yourself on them. Even the confused United States police ask if you have anything that might poke them. I suppose this suggests we have become complacent to the point of boredom, so much so that manly men try to break hands with a firm shake. Story 86. You want the handshake to be firm enough so that it feels like both individuals are actively participating. It doesn't need to be as strong as the handshake between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, but you also don't want a handshake that feels one-sided, where one person is simply lifting the other's limp hand. A firm grip from both individuals creates a positive first impression. Story 87. I always choose a firm handshake, but I also like to match the vibe of the person. If they have a weak grip, I will adjust my handshake to accommodate them. Story 88. I will do a handshake, but I do not read anything more into it than the suit someone wears. The handshake and suit are just a facade. They are trying to project an image that I will not be deceived by. I will pay attention and get a true sense of them. Story 89. When you meet a man, a gentle touch is appropriate. When you meet a woman, a gentle pat on the back is suitable. This is called professional etiquette. Story 90. Think about it from the perspective of the person receiving a limp wrist dainty handshake versus a confident assertive handshake or a powerful handshake. Would you think differently of the person? Would you feel less or more confident in their abilities, trust them more or less, or would you not think twice about it? The way you choose to greet someone forms their first impression. I believe a firm handshake is important in the process of building rapport. A soft handshake may come across as not serious, nearly a brush off, while a strong handshake may be perceived as overly aggressive and negative. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, shaking hands has become less common, but if you do choose to shake hands, it should be done firmly. Story 91. As a production supervisor, I interview candidates for positions. A firm handshake and eye contact go a long way. Story 92. A handshake should be forgettable. A grip that is too firm signals you may come across as rude, while a grip that is too soft suggests other issues. If someone can make those judgments, you are not shaking hands properly. Story 93. I think in my entire life I have done the handshake with maybe 3 people. Perhaps I am more of a simple wave and hello type of person. It feels awkward entering someone's personal space when I first meet them. Story 94. It depends on workplace culture. I usually extend my arm and let them reach out, but in all fairness, my office has no etiquette for handshakes. We all do a sharp nod. Outside of the office, I don't offer firm handshakes at all. Just a simple up and down motion. Story 95. How I wish this firm handshake practice would finally end. As someone who has hand arthritis and needs to use my hands to make a living, I've been left in searing pain from men who feel the need to prove their masculinity by grasping my hand as if they were squeezing toothpaste out of an empty tube. Sometimes I try to avoid this unnecessary custom, but often the man is too quick for me to come up with a good excuse. Please keep in mind that you never know who has hand pain or how much your firm grasp can cause pain that wasn't there before. Story 96. Some years ago, I was looking for a new car. I went to a Kia dealership, and the vendor gave me a limp, sweaty handshake. I instantly left the dealership after that. Story 97. It depends on who it is. With a new boss, there may be elbow touches in the kitchen. For a first-time meeting with my boss's superior, a firm handshake is expected, at least during the first or second meeting. With a new crew, greetings often involve elbow touches. For anyone my significant other works with, it will typically be a handshake unless they opt for a hug, as they are all women. While I have not met them in person, I have spoken with some of them, and we always have a friendly exchange. When it comes to someone I am doing business with, such as a bank associate for a new account, a handshake is the norm. If they initiate a handshake, I am ready and prepared. Story 98. I run a company that builds apartments and met the owner of a fire suppression contractor. He nearly broke my hand when we met. I believe in a firm handshake, but not one where you try to assert dominance. This man had no idea what I did, and I will never hire his company, despite us having a close mutual friend. It's not a contest. Story 99. Shaking people's hands is not a common occurrence for me, but I still vividly remember when someone gave me a weak handshake. I doubt I will ever forget it, even though it happened 15 years ago. Story 100. In a world where older individuals tend to be decision makers, it is important to understand how to approach this correctly, regardless of whether it is considered outdated or not. Story 101. I had surgery on my wrists from injuries sustained in combat overseas, and my nerves never fully recovered. I don't mind the limp handshake at all because even if someone gives me a firm handshake, it will hurt me like no other. I'm a limp handshaker, as you can tell from my comment. I can sense when people judge me for my handshake because days or months pass before they realize, through word of mouth, that my wrists aren't as strong due to combat. Their interest in my background develops without interference on their part, and my opinions on certain popular topics are heard instead of being pushed out of group conversations. However, at this point, I have no interest in conversing with them. You never know why someone is a limp handshaker. Story 102. A little bit of both, I think. It's still a social custom that serves a useful purpose. You meet someone, and you get a feel for them by gripping their hand and shaking it, while making eye contact and introducing yourself or saying farewell or thanks. It's a great social ritual. However, we know a lot about germs now, and handshakes are effective for spreading germs. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we did away with handshakes in exchange for bows, fist bumps, and that awkward elbow greeting for a time. I preferred it that way and have made fist bumps my go-to. It's similar to a handshake but involves less skin contact. I'm less likely to put my knuckles near my eyes, nose, and mouth compared to my palm and fingers. It would be fun if we all switched to curtsies. Don't you want to live in a world where you walk into a job interview and both you and the hiring manager curtsy to each other? Story 103. My son's pediatrician knew their father had died and would teach them how to shake hands properly. At least at that time, it seemed like something a father would teach, along with how to tie a tie. This was before YouTube. Story 104. Although I am a woman and I dislike shaking hands with someone who lacks conviction, in a professional setting, this can make you appear untrustworthy and unprofessional. Story 105. Handshakes mean nothing. My dad always said you could tell a lot about a man by the rigidity of his shins. Story 106. I don't think so. Maybe in business meetings, but outside, I see that people bump fists, at least where I live. Story 107. I have waited on multi-billionaires. Some are quite difficult, but one man gave me a fist bump and then passed out at the table. He was at least 90 years old. His assistant waved me off but tipped me well. The elderly gentleman was very pleasant. Story 108. Yes, based on the last job applicant I had, he has been practicing his firm handshake since the Eisenhower administration. Story 109. A firm handshake means your hand is held in a solid shape, as if you are tensing the muscles in place. The firmness should not come from gripping the other person's hand. Story 110. Nah, I still like the forearm greeting. These days I would rather make sure you are not going to stab me in the back first. Story 111. Firm handshake. Hold for at least 2 seconds and give the other person a slight massage with your thumb. Maintain eye contact for dominance. Story 112. Proper handshake technique involves light to moderate pressure with your 4 fingers on the back of their hand, but avoid flexing your thumb as if you were squeezing their entire hand. 3 to 4 pumps and you're done. Make eye contact, smile and say, "Nice to meet you," or "Good to see you." A simple, warm greeting sets the tone correctly. Story 113. A girl once shook my hand so limply that it felt like we were in a position for me to kiss her hand. It was strange and off-putting. Yes, it is important. It made it seem like she was uninterested in meeting me or that I was forcing her to shake my hand. Story 114. I have always appreciated polite and firm handshakes. The patients in my practice tend to be old-fashioned blue-collar individuals, and they seem to appreciate that as well. However, the pandemic changed everything, so I had to train myself not to initiate handshakes. Now, I wait for them to offer their hand before I shake it. Alternatively, some people prefer knuckle bumps, elbow bumps, or sterile high fives. I simply follow their lead. Story 115. I feel like this is more an influence from men with uncles who will definitely squeeze your hand during a handshake unless you engage fully. Story 116. Yes, I do. Aside from comments about people not washing their hands, particularly at work, you might need to shake people's hands. I don't think a handshake needs to be anything beyond a reasonable level of firmness. I'm not judging you on how firm it is, just a normal handshake. Story 117. It depends on the context. I, a 26-year-old male, like to give people a handshake when I first meet them, but it is entirely situational based on the age of the person I am greeting or being greeted by. In the past, I shook people's hands upon meeting them, but I often received strange looks or comments that I am too white for doing so. People my age and younger generally do not react well to proper handshakes, and if they do reciprocate, they often give me a fist bump instead. As a result, the traditional handshake has become less common among younger individuals. With that age group, I typically either fist bump or refrain from any greeting at all. If I am greeting someone older or if the situation is formal or professional, I will perform a proper traditional handshake. Story 118. People will judge you for it just as they will judge you for 1,000 things you never realized matter. It is less important to have a good handshake than to give an overall good impression, so just put a little effort into what is important to you, and you will do fine. Story 119. Human interaction is complex, and building a person's trust is essential. A handshake is one part of this interaction. While it is not the only important aspect, it is part of a series of significant actions. Why would you intentionally avoid shaking someone's hand without a good reason, especially when it is the norm? Story 120. It depends on the situation and the person. If I give a handshake, it is firm but not overly strong. I am a 36-year-old male and an elementary physical education teacher. If I meet someone aged 40 or older, I will likely offer a handshake, depending on our relationship. If I meet someone in their 30s, I probably won't offer a handshake unless they initiate it. For friends I have known for a decade, I usually prefer a fist bump or a casual greeting. For someone in their 20s, I will probably keep it casual without a handshake unless they engage first. When meeting someone in their teens or younger, I won't leave them hanging. We typically greet each other with a high five. This happens over 200 times a week. Story 121. It depends on the person's age and, if I am in a company setting, their job title. If I am meeting the chief financial officer, the head of human resources, or the head of another department, I will offer a smile and a firm handshake unless stated otherwise. Personally, I think it is outdated, but I understand that it remains incredibly important to some people. Story 122. Over the years, I have noticed a few things a handshake can reveal about a person, making it a valuable custom. A soft and limp handshake often indicates that a person is shy, from a different culture, or is indifferent to meeting me. Conversely, an excessively strong handshake is associated with individuals I find unusual, and I prefer to limit my interactions with them. However, if the handshake is perfect, it suggests that the person has spent too much time thinking about it, which also makes them unusual, leading me to minimize my time with them. Overall, I am an introvert and seek any excuse to return home and limit contact with others. Story 123. I will judge you if your handshake is too weak, too aggressive, or if you grab my fingers instead of making full contact from thumb base to thumb base. Story 124. I try to understand the other person and typically wait for them to initiate. I have no expectations and am indifferent. For people I know but may be meeting for the first time, like an online friend or a friend of a friend, I usually ask if they prefer hugs or handshakes in a casual, friendly manner. So far, everyone has been a hugger. Story 125. It is very important for doctors. Your hand strength reveals a lot about your physical health and well-being. It is an examination. Story 126. I think the best answer to this splits the question. Are handshakes themselves important? No, especially not in casual settings. However, in more formal settings, it is still useful as a gesture of respect. If you're going to give a handshake at all, it should be a firm one. No dead fish, no death grip, no power play. It's a grip, and it's not nearly as complicated as people make it. Have you ever turned a slightly slippery door handle that requires a bit of pressure to make it turn? Or picked up a soapy plate with one hand? Or otherwise had to use pressure to avoid dropping something instead of using your fingers like hooks? Is that a little stronger, maybe, but that's all you actually need to qualify as firm. Story 127. I gradually start to support their thumb. It establishes a position of dominance while also showing them that I am on their side. Story 128. It is a form of communication. It indicates whether someone is taking the interaction seriously or, as someone else said, if they are just going through the motions. In professional settings, this could influence whether you secure a deal. It reflects your confidence or lack thereof. Therefore, I believe it is still important. Story 129. I don't shake hands. We are not monkeys. We do not need to arm wrestle to decide who is most important. We do that with cars. Story 130. Absolutely. The other day, someone shook my hand, and it felt like grabbing hold of an uncooked sausage. Floppy and limp. I judged him immediately. On the other hand, someone who either goes for maximum strength or, my personal pet peeve, grabs your fingers is quite unpleasant. The best way to counteract this is during the departing handshake. First, offer your hand with your palm facing down so they have to submit their hand with the palm up. Second, push your index finger into the underside of their wrist, preventing them from squeezing like the angry little peacock they think they are. Story 131. I don't see the need to shake someone's hand. It's an outdated custom and unnecessary. People have different standards of hygiene. I have seen enough men walk out of a restroom without washing their hands to be disgusted by the thought of shaking hands. I would agree to it if they did not feel offended by me immediately leaving to wash my hands properly. If I had to, it would be a medium strength squeeze. Story 132. I don't want to give people handshakes at all. Hands are usually very unclean even when washed often, considering all the surfaces they touch. Additionally, my hands are often sweaty because people make me nervous. I prefer minimal skin-to-skin contact during a handshake. Holding hands, even in a handshake, feels intimate to me. I also just don't like being touched in general. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, I believe many people no longer enjoy shaking hands. Therefore, I think handshakes are unimportant when you can greet someone with a smile and a hello, conveying your respect by treating them respectfully. Maybe I'm not the best person to ask, but that's my perspective. Story 133. Wealthy white women who offer you their limp hand. What do you want me to do with this? Kiss your ring? Shake my hand like an equal. Story 134. No handshakes. They are unhygienic. They should be left behind with previous generations. Bump knuckles or elbows like a civilized person. Story 135. I just don't respect a man with a floppy fish handshake. I don't know why. I don't care about any other customs, really. But a limp handshake makes me instantly think there is something wrong with the person. When they don't even try to have a firm handshake, it feels unpleasant. And I weirdly feel violated. Story 136. Intentionally firm behavior can come off as unappealing. When someone squeezes hands more than is natural, it often suggests they have personal issues. Conversely, a weak handshake is just as concerning. Shake hands with everyone as you would with a friend. That's the standard. Avoid being unusual. Story 137. For me, it's more about intent. I've botched some first handshakes before, but I don't sweat it. However, making a genuine effort to give a solid handshake sends a message. A limp handshake says, I don't care about this meeting. A handshake that is too hard conveys, I'm trying to dominate you. A firm handshake expresses, I respect you and want to make a good impression. Even if you aim for the third option and it doesn't work due to mistiming or something else, it might be awkward, but you still convey the same message, and that's what matters. Story 138. Honestly, I enjoy using the forearm handshake to surprise people or grab the back of their hand with my left hand, making their hand a little spoon. This is all outside of a professional setting, but I would love to get fired one day for doing this in the office if I could afford to lose the job. Handshakes are silly. Anyone can do it correctly, and if that influences your opinion of them, then you might be a bit unusual or old-fashioned. Story 139. As a man with small, thick hands, I need to grip firmly. If I don't fully engage, I struggle to hold on to larger hands. Of course, I tone this down when shaking a woman's hand, as our hands are of comparable size. Story 140. It depends on the situation. In a job interview, you should give a firm handshake. However, when meeting your friend's friends, it may be unnecessary. Story 141. I believe a firm handshake still matters. It is a small but powerful way to show confidence and respect without saying a word. While times change, first impressions remain timeless. Story 142. I reciprocate. If I enter and it's soft, I won't apply much pressure. If I come in and can immediately feel the tight grip, I will respond with as much force as I can. Story 143. It shows respect and that you care about this interaction. While I don't believe a weak handshake is necessarily the opposite, it is a red flag. On the other hand, trying to crush someone's hand is even worse. We are not competing for dominance. Story 144. Whenever someone tries to shake my hand, I instead lift them in a bear hug, roaring with laughter. When it is time to depart, I grip them firmly on the shoulder and assure them that we will meet again someday in Valhalla, where eternal glory will be ours. I found it leaves a greater impression than a simple handshake. Story 145. I don't think it's an outdated practice. It was never truly a tradition. The original idea was that you could learn a lot about a person from their handshake. A firm grip and eye contact indicated more confidence than someone who looked down and offered a weak handshake. The latter person might be less confident or more insecure. This evolved into the practice of perfecting the handshake to project a desired image. These are just my thoughts. Story 146. Some people care a lot about it, so it might be good to be firm if they offer one. I have never wanted to shake someone's hand. Story 147. I respect a firm handshake, and it is appropriate to give the same respect to others. Occasionally, I encounter someone who crushes hands as a power move, which is annoying but can be dismissed. Story 148. Yes, I do. No, it's not. It shows confidence and respect. I'm a woman, and if a man gives me a limp handshake when I approach with my usual strength, I assume he sees me as fragile and will treat me accordingly. If my husband is present, the man will likely try to talk predominantly to him. Yes, I'm reading into it. They judged me first, and I'm responding to the information I gathered from how they responded to me. Story 149. A firm handshake is still important in many situations, as it shows confidence and respect. A handshake that is too weak can seem awkward, while one that is too strong can come across as aggressive. It is not outdated. It is about making a good first impression. In some settings, alternatives like fist bumps are acceptable as well. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.